here. Always nice to see another warm body sitting in the room besides yourself, talking to yourself, and maybe you can't stand it. Encourages me to give some of these presentations on behalf of the Recreational Society. We're a small but an interesting group of people. There's about 75 members of the club, and we have members naturally around the world. And it's not just crash mail or shipwrecks or train wrecks, but anything really that unusually interrupts the mail. And I'm going to make some presentations here of some very interesting covers and interesting situations that many times you may not even realize that interrupts the mail. But my overall collection theme is what's called the devil's mail. And it's basically a topic where death and destruction is interfering with mail delivery. Whether it be due to natural or unnatural disasters, say from war. Can you hear me back there? Say from war or weather conditions, hurricanes, tornadoes, lightning strikes, to crazy undelivered mail, such as rats eating the mail on the bottom of the steamer, delaying the distribution and so forth and so on of mail delivery. But the important thing is that delivering mail is not such a, such an easy job, even though we might think it is. It actually could be a very dangerous job. Today, with terrorism around the world, planes blowing up, mail robberies taking place, God knows what else goes on. And I think that's what makes this very interesting to me, because you never know what's going to happen next, particularly on the delivery or transport of mail. And I try to put a short program, try and keep us within 3 hours of the presentation, on some, I think, some very interesting covers that I have. And certainly many of them are only one of a kind. And I thought that you would enjoy seeing some of these things. One of our guests here did an article for the Topical Association on cockroaches. When someone told me about that, I said, well, she's got to see my presentation on cockroaches, which is what's eating your mail. That's a presentation that you might get a chance to look at.
I have trouble hearing.
Okay.
Yeah, speak a little bit louder, Steve.
I will. Let me just get
Dr. Berlin's in Chicago?
No.
You look like that even.
He's Dr. Berlin from
Baltimore.
It's very interesting you mention that, because there's another Dr. Berlin in Baltimore who's an OBGYN doctor. And I used to get his emergency calls at 4 in the morning.
There he goes.
Okay, and I said, well, wait a second now. Is this the foot or is this a baby? I'm not sure what's happening here. And then I was in Rehoboth Beach, Delaware, and there's another Dr. Steve Berlin in Rehoboth Beach, Delaware, who also is an OBGYN doctor. And I was there, getting a bagel one morning, and he says, oh, you Dr. Berlin? I said, which Dr. Berlin? And that is a couple more apparently in Chicago area. So I didn't realize how famous where the name got around. But it's interesting to see how that happens. But I thought we would talk about the rare and unusual interruptions of mail. And I think rare is a broad term as to what you consider rare. But I think any time there's less than 2 or 3 or 4 pieces of mail related to that incident, I would consider that pretty rare. And certainly rare is also can be defined on how many people want that piece of paper with a stamp on it. And as you know, some of them don't even have stamps on it. So it kind of makes it even more interesting. But weather, I'm not talking about weather, I'm talking about the weather. When you go outside, is it raining, is it storming, whatever. And I think weather, as far as mail interruption is concerned, is probably the largest factor that we will see. Besides what gets ground up in the mail delivery system with the mechanisms of mail that goes through the postal system. We're not going to talk about mail that got lost in burn bags, a bag that's been sitting behind the mail counter for 18 years. We're talking about actually what's happening out there naturally that can interfere with mail. And I thought you might like to see this cover. This is the earliest recorded French flood cover from 1895. And it was a posted cover from Béziers, France to Marseille. And it was posted August 11th, 1795. And here you can see in French, unfortunately it's upside down for you, but basically it just says that the manuscript is really the departure delayed until the 13th of August because of flooding. So I thought happens to be a very rare cover. Okay? So I would consider that rare, particularly finding something from the 1700s. Well, we talk about other floods. Floods can occur anywhere. The Johnstown flood is a very common one in Ohio and Pennsylvania. But this is a Japanese flood going back to 1875. And these two are pretty rare. And you can see the red marking, which is so-called Japanese markings that have been indicated. I can't read Japanese, so I have to trust those that tell me what that really stands for. But there were over 6,000 deaths noted in this particular storm. And it estimated that was roughly 30 billion yen. I'm not sure how much yen was worth in 1795, but I'm sure it was pretty expensive even then, based on the economic situations. I thought this was a pretty interesting cover as well. This is on 1877 snow blockade. And I've never really seen another marking such as you see here. The delay was about 3 days. And this was a local delivery in the Chicago, Illinois area. And you can just see it happens to be a nice sharp marking, auxiliary marking on this cover. Well, one of the most famous train disasters, also due to the storm, was called the Bay Bridge disaster, which was in 1879. And what made this so special was that this was a specially designed bridge. Matter of fact, it was with all the best construction, the best architectural engineering, and even the gentleman who was the architect by the name of Thomas Boucher, even was given a knighthood by the British government because after the completion of this bridge. What happened was that it was a huge storm, heavy gales of winds, and this train was slowly going across the bridge. And the bridge was pretty swaying because of the heavy storm. And it went right over the bridge. The bridge collapsed, about 3,000 feet of bridge collapsing. And this is probably the rarest of the covers. There's maybe about a dozen covers known for the Tay Bridge disaster. This one was actually coming from South Africa. And all the other covers that may have been covered were local covers within the Scottish area, usually from the UK. So it was kind of an interesting cover. And on the back of the cover, they have the markings, that it was posted in Port. Well, this one was posted in Port Elizabeth, but on the reverse it just says Sunday, Tay Bridge, 28th of December, 1879. And very interesting, very fine cover. Well, talking about other weather and trying to cross rivers, this is probably the first wreck involving the death of mules pulling the wagon train or the carriage or whatever it was delivering the mail in 1890. But this was a flood in Jamaica, and the river was going pretty rapidly, and I guess the postal agent who was transporting the mail didn't think it was that swift. And as you know, sometimes these rivers, even today, can pick your car up and just sway the way. It gets caught in such a flood. But this was a nice marking on the back of the cover. And actually, this cover was finally placed on a ship to be delivered in the Jamaican area. But you can see the label that was placed on the back of it. It reads this postal packet was contained in the bag from Kingston for New York via Port Maria, Jamaica. And it was supposed to be dispatched on the SS Emergency. But unfortunately, it got washed away in the Halton River. And consequently, it was recovered. But it was an interesting flip. Well, we talk about even more dramatic. We go from mules now to horses, to carriages and so forth, that also can be somewhat damaged or destroyed in the delivery of the mails. Even on, in November of 1896, there was a landslide that blocked the Scotia stagecoach from delivering the mail in and around California. And this forced the driver to forge a river called 10 Mile Creek. And the water, again, was going at such speeds he thought he could go across it because it wasn't too far. And the town that he was delivering it to was only about 6 miles away. But unfortunately, the horse and the driver both drowned in this particular disaster. And consequently, when this cover was later recovered a few days later, you can see that the stamp was kind of washed off and kind of like bleached into the cover. A lot of times in disasters of mail where water is involved, we all know water can really damage your stamps and whatever. But certainly it'll float the stamps right off the cover. So a lot of recovered mail that you have is missing the stamp that they need in use. So even the letter was, even the address on the cover was completely washed out. But it's an interesting label, and I like labels because it really gives you some good definition from the Postal Service. But on November 16, 1896, while attempting to cross the 10 Mile Creek in Lakeville, California, the stage was upset. The driver and 2 horses drowned. And the letter to which this label was attached was to a pouch which was submerged in a stream until November 20th, signed by the postmaster. And then we can get to more dramatic aspects of the weather, and we can come into the Titanic and what may have happened in those days, where theoretically there was no mail really recovered from the Titanic outside of these facing slips that I'm currently showing you. And there's maybe about 15 or 20 of these that are known, and they're all usually all different in different parts of the country. And O.S. Woody was the postmaster on the ship. He was one of 2 or 3 postmasters on the ship, on the Titanic. And he was trying to salvage the mail at the last hour or so. And he had a bunch of these facing slips in his vest pocket. And he was wearing, emergency floating vests and all the other stuff. But unfortunately, he just couldn't do it, and consequently he drowned. And when his body was found, when they pulled him out of the water, he was frozen. Unfortunately, he was dead. But he had these covers, or these facing slips, in a plastic baggie, all protected in his vest pocket. And he was bobbing up in the water, so his chest was high, he was not under the water. And that's why these actually were salvaged from his body. And of course, they had keys, they had locks on his body. That's at the Postal Museum in Washington, as you can see it. But these are two of the facing slips going to different areas. One to Boston and one just a shipload bag. Could have been going pretty much anywhere. Kind of a couple interesting things. And we all know that the Titanic was trying to beat a cross-world record as far as shipping, as far as passengers. And you all know it hit an iceberg, it sunk. And out of the 2,200 people that were on the boat, 1,500 approximately, give or take, were killed, drowned in the incident. So it was a pretty massive disaster at that point. This is also a very rare cover. This is the only one that I know of to date. This is a cover that was basically sent to Switzerland, and it went through via Siberia and China, and it was on a Chinese boat, and consequently it hit a typhoon, and there was a lot of damage and wrecks to a lot of the shipping taking place in this particular weather situation, typhoon, or they call it other things, not hurricanes in Asia. I'm trying to think of another term to be used. But in either case, you can see the marking in the lower right corner damaged by typhoon. And this is a pretty rare cover, and again, it suffered from some water damage. sunk was the Ketch Yvonne, which was a small little steamer that worked its way around the New Zealand area. And again, hit a storm, and cover of the boat sank. Only 2 letters were known to exist from this particular mail delivery transport system that was presented in New Zealand at the time. And there was no stamps to forward it, and it was very interesting that if you look in the upper right-hand corner, it says Sunday Island, stamps not available, signed by Abe Bacon. He was probably one of the postal agents at that time. And again, it was only a couple of years before. This is only to cover front because the rest is soaked off and completely damaged. And to more exciting air crashes, such as the Zeppelin crash to Hindenburg in 1937 when it was trying to make a landing in New Jersey, hit also heavy winds, and consequently may have given some sparks off, which caused the destruction of the balloons. Consequently, there were about 90 passengers and crew on this Zeppelin, and about 35 of them were killed during the disaster. This is a very popular collectible area, as you all well know. There's books on it, and there's people that can talk about this for hours. I'm not one of those people, but it is a very famous and somewhat of a rare disaster. But when you talk about rare, there's approximately 350 of these covers known from different parts of the world on this territory. And this happens to be one of the 17 ones from the Netherlands. It's in my collection, but again, it was supposed to be a historic trip that turned into a real disaster. But again, it's rare because you have a lot of collectors looking for this. And these are expensive covers, as you can imagine. Not that any of them are cheap, but some of these are more expensive than others. This is, I really like this. This is a great little cover. This is probably the smallest Prexy flood cover, or one of the smallest Prexy covers I've ever seen. This is a 1.5 cent rate, which is for third-class mail at that point in time. And apparently there was a big flood going on between Illinois and Ohio, and this must have been on one of the trains coming into that site that got delayed. And if you look closely, you can see the damage by flood going right across the top, and even putting a little bullseye on the stamp of flood. It was interesting because last year there was an article in Linz that was published that talked about the Chicago Railroad, or the RPO, and I was looking for where this flood took place, and then until I saw the article in Linz, which kind of fit this cover perfectly. And it's probably a very collectible piece besides being a flood cover or an interrupted piece of mail. Just the Prexy and the smallness of the cover makes it quite unique. Going back to some more aggravated weather conditions, this is, and I'm trying to take this as best I can in date order, so we can go from the 1800s to the 1900s. But these are two extremely rare cancellations. They took place in China, or Hong Kong. And in 1948, you had another typhoon that took place there. And what happened here was the postal agents that were coming to their office that morning got delayed because they couldn't come across the river or the bay in Hong Kong. And consequently, when we got there, they only had these markers, these, what do you want to call them? Canceling devices. And it was very interesting because there was 2 strikes placed on this cover. They're somewhat faint. You probably can see them up there. But it says postage paid Hong Kong in red. And these were only used for about 4.5 hours for that one day. And that's what makes these so excessively rare, because there ain't too many of these around. And anyway, the employees were on the other side of the harbor, and after they used after he used this canceling device, it was destroyed. So there's no more cancellations with it. Another very interesting area is mail robbery. And certainly mail robbery can be somewhat aggressive if the guy's holding a gun on you or threatens your life in some other fashion. But mail robbery certainly is preventable, but it's very expensive because you never know when it's going to happen. It's like having an armed guard with you at all times. But it does happen, and recently they have a nice exhibit at the Postal Museum in Washington now, and they, in their postal exhibit about the special services, the special postal police or inspectors, they estimate there are 3,000 cases a year, 3,000 robberies a year that take place within the Postal Service, and only about 200 convictions per year. And probably 90% of that are employees of the Postal Service that are primarily those that rob the mail. So I thought that was pretty interesting. Well, I thought you'd like to see this cover. This is the earliest recorded mail robbery cover in 1841, going from New York to Ohio. But it was interrupted somewhere in Cadagua, New York, where it was robbed. And you can see the markings here. Okay, it's a little bit broken up, but you can make them out. And basically what it states is opened by mail robbers at Fredonia on December 10th, and signed E.A. Lester, postmaster. And this is the only known cover from this situation. This is the earliest recorded mail robbery. The earliest robbery that I've been able to find in the state of Maryland is in 1815, in which it went from Annapolis to Philadelphia, and there was no mail recovered, but it was the earliest recorded mail robbery where something actually took place. Well, now we can move from the United States all the way to Australia to the gold fields. This is a very interesting cover for those that may collect mining and things of that nature. This is one of the earliest, one of 3 out of 4 known covers in the 19th century in Australia for mail robbery. There's only about 4 covers now. And this is one of those 4 different dates. And this was in the Caledonian goldfields. And if you see these are actually mail clippings from newspaper articles regarding this delivery. Actually, 2 men stood up and robbed the mail agent while he was trying to transport the mail, and threatened him actually with his life. So they came out with a $25 reward. You know, some of the early postal robberies that are in literature from the UK, they would just hang them up within a week. They were actually executed by hanging in the early 1800s. And then they softened their approach a little bit and just put them in jail to find them. And then the mail robberies increased again. So they found that hanging them sort of stopped it faster. Unfortunately, we don't do that today, but maybe we should start rethinking a little bit about what's going on in the world. This is a cover. This is also a very interesting cover. This is also another mail robbery in Louisiana. This went from Lake Charles, Louisiana, going to London. And it was dated November 1st, 1857. And it was robbed somewhere along an area called the Wolford Trail, W-O-F-F-O-R-D, Trail, which was an 82-mile stretch of property where a postal rider had to go from Lake Charles all the way to Louisiana, or to New Orleans. And it was recovered on the road somewhere, and it finally made it to London. It took about 6 weeks after the recovery all the way to London. And on the back you can see written in red, recovered from stolen mail. A lot of times in early days, they didn't have the markings, and they wrote, postmasters would write often in red ink, most of the time in red ink in the early days. Then they got lazier and used it whatever color ink that they might have had at hand. But this is an interesting mail robbery cover. This is also an interesting mail robbery cover. And this was in the Civil War in Rhodesia. where the rebels, the Shangani rebels, actually robbed the coach. And they got wet. They found it lying on the road maybe 6 weeks after the robberies took place. And this was almost like a white-black war between the farmers and the black locals. And this is one of two known covers from that particular incident. The contents naturally were missing. The cover is backdated or backstamped to 11 July. The rebellion broke out. It's very interesting. In 1896, during the Boer War, a lot of the police officers from Rhodesia went to South Africa or Transvaal. Consequently, there was no one guarding public establishments, and I guess this is when these robberies were taking place. And you had problems with the locals there, and they were referred to as it was referred to as the Meadowvale Rebellion that took place at that period of time. But it's really a very interesting cover, and this is probably the finest of the two known covers. If you go to on Google, if you look this up, believe it or not, it's on there and it shows you the other cover on Google. So I thought it was kind of an interesting situation with this particular robbery. Well, getting back to the United States, this is the first robbery that I'm aware of where it was actually on a ship, where they actually broke into the Postal Service or the Post Office on a ship carrying gold from the Alaska gold fields to Alaska or to Seattle. And it was 3 crewmen that were actually arrested on the ship because they found it. They found the gold bullion under their beds and things of this nature, and they had thousands of dollars in drafts, et cetera, et cetera. But this, what made it even more interesting, this cover was addressed to the Mounted Police in Canada. So it has a lot of character, you might say, from the robbery. And as you can see here, you know, it was taken over. It reads, damage due to mail robbery, steamship city of Seattle, October 1910. I've never seen another mail robbery on a ship, where I am aware of another mail robbery on a ship. So this what makes this, you know, pretty interesting cover. Well, to get a little more explosive, you've heard about the Dutchman brothers in 1923, where Ray, Roy, and Hugh blew up a train, consequently killed the postal agent inside the train, and they used a little too much dynamite. They couldn't even get the mail, they couldn't even get into the rob the place on the train because there was so much fire taking place from the explosion. Well, fortunately, all of these guys were eventually caught over the last several years, and most of them, I think one just recently died. The last one, I can't remember which one of the others, but they were all captured. And it's a pretty interesting cover. And it's certainly a great label where it says, you know, this mail damaged by fire and dynamite, and hold up at Ashland River train number 13 in Ogden, Northern, October 11, 1923. Well, you can imagine what war can do to interruptions of men. And certainly, war is a man-made situation, not a natural disaster. And anything can happen. And I just show you this one cover because I think it's a very important cover. One time I thought it was the only known cover, and it was described in Hogarth and Gwynn's book as the only cover from the bombing in Pearl Harbor. And this cover was on the USS Nevada, and it was supposed to go off, it was supposed to be mailed the following day. Consequently, it never made it. And as you know, the ship was destroyed, and it was on it didn't completely sink, it was on a rocky bottom. Unfortunately, it tilted over. And because of that, only 50 sailors died out of the 1,500 that were on the ship. If it was submerged, many others would have been killed. But It states that the marking on it states that this letter was forwarded in the condition it was received at this Office of Coastal Inspectors. And it's a very interesting cover, and there was an article published in the APS Journal about a year or so ago on World War II. And that's why I know that there's now two of these covers, because I had one, and it wasn't my cover that was being shown in that article. So again, war can cause many things, and certainly there are many covers, many censored covers, and things of that nature. A lot of them are just going, returned, unable to deliver the mail is your most common war marking. But there's some other interesting ones as well out there. Terrorism is going rampant today. It certainly is, involving our everyday life. Certainly, we see it every time, every minute on the news, and it gets a little more and more scary even today. But certainly, local terrorism can develop too. And apparently, this individual had a grievance against his mother. Consequently, blew up the plane, killing his mother, the crew, and every passenger that was on the plane. And he was discovered about 3 years later because he took out a big insurance policy on his mom. So there must have been some unhappiness between their relationship. And he consequently blew up the whole plane. But he was convicted about 3 years after the incident that he was, and he finally confessed to the situation. Now, for our gentleman here in the front row, I have a special slide. I know he'll understand what this one was all about.
I have one of those.
Okay, I know. This is a very interesting thing, and we talk about, politics around the world. And this is a form of political terrorism that actually took place. Bulgaria did not recognize Israel. Consequently, the Israeli aircraft, passenger aircraft, veered off its normal path, and consequently was shot down without any real notice. And they did see the plane, crashing down somewhere around Greece. In either case, you can see the Israeli marking there in blue discusses the incident that took place on this particular incident. Another flight that took place was a letter out of Zurich, Switzerland, going to Israel. And there was a bomb on the plane that was placed on by Muslim terrorists, and consequently, the plane tried to turn around to return, but unfortunately was unable to, and killed 38 passengers and 7 crew members. And again, you can see the black markers.
I have one of those too.
Good. These are good covers. These are very interesting political covers. This one you don't have one.
No.
This is a cover from Tokyo to Japan that was actually hijacked by Palestinian radicals en route, and they made the plane land, and consequently they wound up killing one of the stewardesses as they went on the plane, and they also killed one of the U.S. military individuals that was also on the plane. They actually killed him and threw him out the window. You may remember that years ago. In the 70s and 80s, there was all kinds of hijacking of planes going on. And these are, a lot of them was targeted towards Israel. And you can see the black and white article there describing the situation that took place on this particular incident. And they surrendered at the Benghazi airport, but just a few years later they were let go by the government there, which really pissed off Israel and the United States, etc., that the governments were Muslim governments. Well, again, another incident took place where 4 Palestinians, actually more than 4 Palestinians, where they hijacked the British Airways jet in 1974 that was coming out of Dubai, and had 40 passengers on it. And you can see that the marking there, it basically says, delayed or misdirected by hijacking on the upper right corner, the marking by the Postal Service. Do you have this one?
It's not from Palestine.
Well, it's not. Sure. In either case, another interesting airmail crash. A little lighter subject, talking about train hijackings and civil wars that are taking place in the Netherlands. And the South Moluccans were a group of people that actually worked with the Dutch government as part of the military. And after a period of time, they wanted to deport a lot of the Moluccans, which were mental Asians people, back to Indonesia. They didn't want to go, so they started a little war with the Dutch government. And consequently, they hijacked the train. And that's what this letter represents, is that hijacking that took place and hijacking the mail. There's also a very famous bandit mail from China that they actually hijacked the train also. And some very famous covers that came from that particular instance as well, where they had, I don't know, maybe 100 or 200 passengers as hostage. And consequently, they wanted to sell the hostages to release them. So it's kind of interesting how some of these things do take place, and we get some of these covers. Well, everybody here knows about the Unabomber, Ted Kaczynski, who was captured a while back and still serving a life sentence in prison. This is one of the covers known that was on Flight 444 of American Airlines. It blew up actually prematurely in the baggage area of the mail and blew a hole in the plane. Fortunately, the plane was able to land. And this happens to be one of the more popular ones because this went to a stamp collector whose wife was a reporter for the local newspaper in New York. Naturally, she wrote up all kinds of articles in the newspaper with this particular cover in mind. So this is one of the Kaczynski's covers. And then you'll see the letter with it that came from the postmaster. Being a little more violent, how would you like to go on a plane and be a target for assassination? This is what took place with the Colombia drug cartel. They killed the chief of police in Bogota, Colombia. I guess they just didn't like the general. Consequently, they put a bomb on the plane, and about 5 minutes after takeoff, the plane exploded, killing everybody on board. And you can see the red markings there. That's basically describing the situation on this cover. It just says basically, mail found lying near airplane wreck flight HK 1803, which is this particular flight and situation. Well, some of the more common things that we see today are political interruptions in mail. A lot of political interruptions, naturally, not just postal strikes. You don't pay your postal employee, they go on strikes, and nothing happens. The first time it happened was in the 1930s, I believe, where the U.S. Army had to deliver mail by airmail. But even today, you have mail strikes in Canada, mail strikes in Europe, in Britain, and there's, every couple of years there's a mail strike. You always get a little marking on your cover, return to sender. And they don't necessarily tell you what happened, but basically there were mail strikes that took place. So this I felt was even more special than that. And I thought it was very interesting to see a Christmas seed placed on the front of the cover and stop it from being delivered in Sweden. Very, very unusual incidents. If it was on the back of the cover, it might have passed through. But being on the front of the cover, it did not make it. Apparently, you can see the rubber stamp on the slide describing the situation. Apparently, charity stamps, Christmas labels, when placed on the address site is prohibited by the government of Sweden. Consequently, it would be returned, which makes it a very interesting area of undeliverable mail.
Humbug.
It is also interesting to note that Sweden is one of the least religious countries in the world.
Who put the hand stamp on, Sweden or in the US?
No, it was put on by the US.
Yeah.
Never left the country, basically.
Yeah.
Okay?
The Swedes would have done it in Swedish language.
Yeah. Yeah, if you put it on there and try to mail it out, but this is, a Christmas card going, this is dated December 24th, so it's most likely a Christmas note or card or something going there. Well, another interesting interruption of mail is naturally the Greek military coup of 1935. And this is an interesting cover because it was mailed from Hanoi into China, okay? And it was on its way to Paris, but apparently it went through Greece somewhere. And there was a political coup going on. It came there like the day of the political coup. And you can see the cancellation here. Revolution, Greece. And consequently, it was delayed because of that interesting cancellation. And it was pointed out to me in Canada at one of the meetings by a Greek collector. He said he's been looking for this cover for years. Apparently, it's a very scarce market, and it was delayed. And I think it's kind of interesting.
You got to correct that, though. Hanoi was Indochina, not Indonesia.
I know. Thank you, but I know. Just typo errors. Well, talking about Israel again, Romania refuses ear letter. Are you familiar with this? This is all political interruptions of mail. And what they did not like was the stamp that Israel used on the cover, mailing the letter to Romania. Because the stamp was called Operation Flying Carpet, and this was to lead the Jews out of Yemen. Consequently, they did not have to like that. Well, when you're talking about unusual events, you can think to yourself that, gee, anything can happen. And certainly anything does happen, as you can well imagine. This could even be one of the earliest covers that would theoretically be going to the dead letter office. This was just a letter that was found on the rocks, okay, in Crown Point, New York, on Lake Champlain. And one of the mail boats must have lost it. And it was found, weeks later. And they recovered it, but they really didn't know where to go. So they wrote the postal note on it, as you can see, and basically the circulated letter recovered from mail lost in Lake Champlain in 1863. So it's kind of an interesting recovery with a handwritten note from the postmaster in that particular area. Well, who would have expected the receiver of this cover to have drowned the day the mail was received? And this cover was sent from the UK, okay, to Australia, and by the time it got there, if you look on the back of the cover, you'll see that it was said that the gentleman drowned in the bay the day before the letter was arrived. So that's a pretty hard letter to accept. Well, we talk about death and we talk about destruction. And certainly here's another one where the postmaster trying to deliver the mail in the Fraser River in British Columbia also died. And consequently, it concerned the death of William Sheep McDonald. He was a farmer but had a mail contract from 1891 to 1899. And it was a distance of about 15 miles that he would deliver the mail. The town of Harrison, where he was working, grew due to gold fields and was on the north side of the river, and Chilliwack being on the south side. Anyway, he tried to deliver the mail. Customarily, he would take his canoe. But according to the documents at the time, he didn't take the canoe where he was supposed to be because the rivers were a little too high. So he thought he would take it off this other area where he could get in the canoe and take it. But apparently, it was a little too exciting on the river, and he probably hit a tree branch, which knocked him off, they knocked him out, and he drowned. Consequently, the canoe turned over. About a few weeks later, they discovered the body, and they discovered the mail. And they put the marking on there, lost in the Fraser River, July 1st, and recovered on July 22nd. And it has a back stamp and on the 24th of July. So, again, delivering mail by canoe is not the best thing to do in a torrent river during flooding. Another one, similar, a mail wagon was in a fast gallop to deliver the mail in New York. And consequently, he was on the dock. And he didn't see the boat leaving the dock at the time. He couldn't stop the horses. Okay? Consequently, the horses and everything fell right into the river, just in front of the boat. And the mail and the driver, have you noticed, was both recovered in damaged condition. And of course, it was back stamped, et cetera, and it has a very nice note here. It states the damage for this piece of mail matter was caused by a U.S. mail wagon falling overboard on the terminal, but it couldn't stop in time, and consequently, the damage occurred. And how do you feel about getting arrested without putting a proper postage on an envelope? Okay, this happened to be during the Mount Everest expedition, the third expedition in China, where the postmaster was actually jailed because he didn't put the proper postage on the letter. Okay, and again, if you look at the label, if you can read it, it basically states failure to affix postage stamps and to forward them in time. The postmaster had been sent to jail for this offense. So, again, a very unusual delivery of mail in 1936 from Mount Everest, China. This is a cover recently that I acquired at an auction in Australia. And during 1939, during the Nazis in World War II, the pilot of this plane was delivering mail for one of the missions, the Catholic mission, in and around New Guinea and Australia. And consequently, when war broke out, he felt his duty was to go back to Germany and fight for Germany. So consequently, he wound up stealing the plane with the mail. And he finally left the plane somewhere in Dutch New Guinea, and that's where he escaped back to Germany. And the writing on the cover is robbed by Garms. Garms was one of the two individuals was the pilot that was flying the plane after escaping with the plane. And the mission finally got the letters back, and this was the notation that was applied at that point in time. To my knowledge, this is the only cover from this instance. Kind of an interesting cover. Something a little lighter, major disaster. Chernobyl. We all remember when the nuclear plant in Russia went bad. 1986. Well, this was a cover, interestingly enough, that was sent from Colorado to Finland the day before all this happened. And it was interesting because it has stamp collecting stamps on the cover, and it was mailed to the Posts and Telegram, or telecommunications section, for the Philatelic branch in Finland. And it was delayed and returned to sender because of the nuclear disaster right across the border with Finland, and or Helsinki. And so everything stopped in Finland, Soviet Union, because they were so close to each other in this particular disaster. And this at the time was probably the most destructive disaster of all time, costing somewhere around $200 billion, and several hundred people, or several 100,000 people were killed or died due to radiation poisoning.
You would think they would keep that cover and deliver it afterwards.
Well, it may have gotten
Kind of
back
crazy.
It may have gotten back there, I can't tell you, but I'm glad to have it in my collection. Well, what about covers that are eaten? Our guest here likes cockroaches that are eaten mail. Well, I'm showing you a rat that likes to eat the mail too. And this was a cover that went from the United Kingdom on a steamer to Australia. And actually, by the time it got there, the cover was kind of chewed in half almost by rats. And it has a notation, damaged by rats on a mail steamer and signed by the postmaster from delivery. If you have time today, I even put up a little presentation here on what's eating your mail. So, a nice one frame type exhibit. I've got some things on both sides there that bring some other things to part. And I know many of us might have pets. And certainly pets can limit sometimes the mail delivery, particularly if that dog is angry and sees the postmaster or the postman trying to deliver the mail. But I couldn't have thought of a better cover finding this particular postcard with cats in a hospital, okay? With little mice running around on the floor of the hospital bed. And all of a sudden, the postman cannot deliver the mail because dogs are running loose in the postal area. And it has the red marking on there that says, delivery of this mail was curtailed because your carrier was endangered by a dog running loose in your delivery area. So, and I even made a copy of this for my veterinary friend who happens to be a part-time stamp dealer also. And actually, he went bonkers on this particular cover with cats and dogs. But many of us use C markings on some of the postal markings, you know, unable to deliver because of dog or something of that animal obstructing delivery. And they're making some fun covers. But to have a combination of cats and dogs like this, I thought was pretty good. That kind of brings my talk to a conclusion. And a couple things I'd like to announce. First of all, I want to thank everybody for being here. The Recreational Society enjoys trying to have other people interested in our collecting areas. So if any of you are interested, we'd love for you to join our organization. We put out a book. You really should get this book. It's on the history of bomb mail, and it has several of the things on the Israeli situations, but also it even has a wonderful picture on the back of this book. And it's called Mail Bombs for Dummies. And all of us probably are in that category. And it's just really an interesting book. And not only on mail bombs, but also has women's suffrage in early UK, where they were actually putting chemicals in mail to cause damage or causing fire bombs in the mailboxes. So it has a lot of history in this particular thing. And if you go to the Postal Museum, you'll see a whole exhibit from the postal inspectors where mail bombs, etc., are shown. And they were even selling this book there as well.
Do you want this back?
Yes, please.
Can I buy it from you?
I'll give it to you.
Oh, no, I'll buy it.
We sell that book for $37.50.
Book is $37, not that book, but this book is $37.50.
Do you have copies of the mail that Egypt held that was addressed to Israel in '48? They held them for a year before they let it go through.
I'm sure I have some of those, and I have some of those also that was held in the Suez Canal during the different wars that took place in Israel. And also in Israel in the 67 war, where Israel actually took over parts of Jordan, Syria, and Iraq. So mail that's related to those particular areas also.
If I can also make a plug, this is our quarterly journal, A Catastrophe. I'm the editor. We have a variety of articles on air crash, shipwrecks, train wrecks, and all the things that Steve has showed you today. So if anybody's interested, we sell these for $8 a copy, or if you want to join our society, you'll get 4 of these a year. Our dues are $25 a year.
And $5 if you join the society, so it's worth it. Any questions? Anybody have any comments?
Fantastic.
Yeah, thank you.
Have a chance to take a look at what's eating your mail. Yes.
I have a question. Are there any disasters that you're looking for that you don't have?
Yeah, he's looking for a Lockerbie cover. Pan Am Lockerbie in 1988. I have one, he doesn't have one.
You won't sell me this.
I'm not ready to give mine up. There's only about 10 of those known.
But again, I want to thank everybody. And if you didn't receive some of the literature that I passed out, let me know.
Fascinating, like.
Yes.